Imagine a family where the parents are completely abusive, they hate their children, beat them, and treat them in the worst possible way. But no one, absolutely no one in the world, suspects what they do. And even so, they're a couple who still post photos on Facebook. They pretend to be happy, making their kids smile for photos and posting them so no one suspects anything. And what if I told you there was once a couple like that who had 13 children, even though they hated each and every one of them? And if no one had stopped them, they definitely would have had more. This is one of the most bizarre stories I've ever seen about intense abuse inside a home. But for us to understand what I'm talking about, we need to start from the beginning. Let's go. David Allen Turpin and Louise Anna Turpin were born in Princetown in Western Virginia. They met when they were very young, okay? Anna's family rejected the relationship. That's because when they met, Anna was 15 years old and David was 22. It was pretty complicated at first, okay? Anna's family was Christian, very religious, and they forbade this relationship. So what did they do? They ran away to Texas and spent some time there. Then the police ended up finding them, right? At Anna's family's request, they ended up coming back, and after a while, her family realized there was nothing they could do, that nothing would separate them. So, in 1985, a year later, they got married. David was 23 years old and Louise was 16 years old. They then moved to Texas, and throughout their marriage, the couple started a family. From the moment they started building a home, they became a very reserved couple. Neither the family nor friends knew what was happening inside the house. Louise's sister Elizabeth also lived there for a time. At that time, the couple already had 4 children, and Elizabeth said that the atmosphere in that house was completely strange. First of all, the house was completely dirty, messy, and disorganized. Elizabeth couldn't stand being inside. She, who was the children's aunt, couldn't communicate with the kids. In other words, the children would only talk to her when David and Louise's parents were present, until one day she was taking a shower and they came into the bathroom. For her, that was the breaking point, because she had no privacy. They didn't give her any privacy. She also says that David had complete psychological control over Louise. He controlled the way she dressed, the way she spoke, even the way she ate. Louise always seemed hypnotized by her husband, and she never challenged his orders. The house felt oppressive and gloomy. Elizabeth said she was uncomfortable from the moment she arrived to live with them. And that didn't last long. She left soon after. She also described that the family's life there always seemed to revolve around David's life. He also made inappropriate comments and sometimes even made advances toward her. After that, guys, Elizabeth never heard from the couple again, just so you can get an idea of how reserved they were. Years after the bombshell, Elizabeth wrote a book about it. The book is called The Secret Sisters, the story of a surviving sister after she left their house. In the 90s, they began living without witnesses. Elizabeth was the last to see anything, and despite all she endured, it was simply strange. There was nothing that could be reported to the police or told to anyone. The couple kept having children, reaching a total of 13 kids. They were born between 1988 and 2015. I'm going to pause the timeline and jump to 2018 so you can understand what happened on January 14, 2018. Afterwards, I'll come back. A girl, apparently young, started walking around her neighborhood, looking kind of dazed. She walked as if she didn't know the neighborhood and wasn't really sure where she was. But it's important for you to know that she was actually very close to her house after she ran and got a little farther away from home. She grabbed a cell phone that was inside her house, which was a really old phone and could only make emergency calls. She then called the police and asked for their help. She said that she lived in precarious conditions at home, she was beaten every day, and her siblings were kept chained up. She spoke in a strange way because she had never talked to anyone except her parents and, of course, her siblings who lived with her. The police then asked her where she was, and she couldn't answer that because she didn't know where she was, she didn't know the street, the address, nothing. Through a sign nearby, she managed to get the postal code of the street, and then a police car was able to go there with 2 officers. She starts to explain the situation to them, and they immediately understand that it's not a safe situation and not a very simple one to solve, right? So they end up calling several police cars and all of them head to their house. When they arrive at the house, guys, they simply witness a horror show. This house belonged to the Turpin family, and now I'm going to tell you how this all unfolded. When they had their first children, they still went to school. The Turpin family seemed to have a normal life, and the children would leave the house like any other kids. The first 4 children. After some time at school, the teachers started to notice that the children smelled really bad. School, it was like they didn't take a bath every day, and their education wasn't really adequate either. They were kind of like wild animals, you know? After the teachers started questioning the parents a lot about this, David registered a private school inside his house. That was so he could educate his children at home. And that's possible in the United States, guys. After a while, David and Louise's relatives couldn't visit the children anymore, so no one had any contact with the kids. But even so, after being missing for a while, they would end up taking some trips and taking pictures, as if the families were in perfect condition, as if they were fine. And they posted these photos on Facebook where they had all their relatives as friends, and the relatives ended up seeing these photos. So they believed that the couple was living their life over there and that they were doing really well. That's because when they went on trips, they would buy new clothes for the kids, sometimes matching outfits, the girls all dressed alike and the boys too. The boys had their hair cut exactly like David used to have his hair when he was younger. And then they made the kids smile for the picture, and the kids had to smile. In the photos, the children looked kind of pale, kind of thin, but they didn't show anything that would cause alarm. They did this, guys, because they wanted to have something on the internet so no one would bother them. Deep down, I think they knew what they were doing, you know? The rules at home started to get worse and worse, and they were as follows. Playing and socializing among themselves or with others was forbidden. Any attempt to question the rules resulted in severe punishments. David and Louise used methods of psychological and physical torture, including chains. They used them to tie up the children where they stayed. At first they used ropes, but when the children got loose, they switched to chains. They also neglected to provide food in various ways. Many times they themselves ate the food they made, and they would give the leftovers to the children to eat. Sometimes, guys, Louise would bake a cake and take it to the children, put it in front of them, and the children weren't allowed to have any. Louise and David would laugh at the children's reaction as they watched them eyeing the thing, wanting to eat it. They were also forbidden from practicing hygiene, meaning they couldn't take a bath. It got to the point, guys, where they would bathe only once a year. It's real, okay, guys? And the punishments could last for days, guys. They had punishments like suffocation, and they were beaten by them every day. Louise always remained submissive to David, you know, as his accomplice. All of this in creating absurd and abusive rules that they made up as the children grew up. They were constantly reminded that they couldn't communicate with anyone outside the house because it was totally dangerous. Many of them grew up afraid and dependent on their parents, right? Increasing that dependence. I'll just give you a spoiler, guys. One of the children was already 29 years old in 2018, okay? Can you imagine a 29-year-old still relying on their parents and growing up with that mindset? For him, that was everything. One day, they even let 3 of the children play a little outside the front door, and they were kind of alone. And then, a neighbor came over to talk to them, because he had never seen them there before, to speak with them. They didn't say a word to the neighbor, and ran back into the house in a panic, as if they had seen a monster outside. After that, they never went out again. All the children lived in conditions of extreme malnutrition, and when the police arrived at the house, they found some of the children weighing. So little that they thought those children weren't the age they actually were. For example, the son, who was 29 years old, looked like he was 13 because he was so malnourished and small. The skin on the children's bodies was extremely dirty, grimy, and it was only cleaned. Where the chains were, there was a mark from the chains. The clothes they wore, because they were so dirty, were heavy and stiff. They were also malnourished because of the sunlight, which they didn't have much contact with. They didn't know what sunlight was. When they were kept inside the house, the light inside was extremely limited, and they were often kept in dark rooms for long periods of time, especially when they made mistakes. In their parents' view, when they were tied up with chains, they would spend days or weeks there in the same place, unable to leave, after they were discovered. Some of the children said that these punishments were given for trivial reasons, including speaking loudly. They would already be punished for that. They also had a public behavior that was very different from reality. That was so no one would notice, right? So when they traveled, they didn't treat their children like that. They even pretended to be a happy family at Disney, there with Mickey. And on the day their 16-year-old daughter escaped, her name was Jordan. She was going to escape with another sibling, who got very scared, changed their mind, and ended up going back. And after the police arrived there, they questioned all the children, and all the kids told them what was happening inside. They then started a thorough investigation and everything. One of the things that shocked the police the most was the way they ate. That's because they were called one by one, sometimes every 3 days, to go to the kitchen of the house, and they had to eat a piece of bread with a pate that they prepared, and sometimes just bread. They divided it among 3 children. In fact, when they got to the kitchen to eat, that was the only time they had access to the kitchen. They couldn't sit down, so they had to eat standing up. And many times they felt sick from standing there. They also slept more than 15 hours a day because they couldn't do anything. And I believe also because of their physical condition, right? Due to their physical condition, they needed more sleep, which worsened their health. Many honestly didn't even know how to interact with others. They literally looked like wild animals. Some of their children were scared of everything they saw. The next day, the case went viral and became a top national news story. They ended up discovering that the only one who worked in the family was David. He was an engineer at a company, and he earned really well. And believe it or not, he was highly praised at the company. He was like an exceptional employee, and David's co-workers would never believe that he would do something like that. Everyone at the company was shocked to learn David was that kind of person. And Louise didn't work, right? She only handled the housework, but did so poorly. The place was messy and dirty, with dead animals inside living alongside the children. David and Louise were arrested, and this happened in 2018, right after everything blew up, right? When their daughter escaped and the police went to their house. David was 56 and Louise was 49 at the time. They were charged with 75 different crimes, 12 of which were for torture. In February 2019, David and Louise pleaded guilty to 14 charges, including torture, child abuse, false imprisonment, and neglect. They confessed as part of a plea deal, right? So they could go to trial quickly. In April 2019, the Riverside County Court in California sentenced both of them to life in prison, with the possibility of parole after 25 years. The reason for the quick sentencing was the plea deal, which sped up the whole process, and the prosecutors decided it was safer to secure a life sentence right away, super fast. That's because they didn't want to go through a long and traumatic trial, especially for the children. The kids wouldn't have to go through all of that anymore. That's because probably, if the trial lasted for years, the children would have to be called to testify. So that's it, guys. They're still in jail to this day, and I don't even know. Do the math. This was in 2019. After some time, they'll be able to request parole, but nobody knows if they'll grant it, right? If the judge will grant that freedom. Besides that, by court order, they can never get closer than 90 meters to their children, except inside a courtroom if there's a future trial. When the judge gave them this news, this was Louise's reaction looking at David. Guys, this case is really heavy. Guys, just imagine what's going on in these children's minds, how they're growing up, right? And how hard it must have been for these people, for the children, both adults and kids, to reintroduce themselves, right? Into society, into reality, to reintroduce themselves, right? Because others weren't even introduced. They had to be introduced. The children ranged from 2 to 29 years old. Jordan, 16 at the time, escaped and is the most well-known among them. Some of the children had their identities withheld, and I'll tell you their ages in 2018. One was 2 years old, another was 7, another was 10, another was 12, another 14, another 16, another 17, another 19, another 21, another 23, another 25, another 27, and another 29. Guys, this shows what they were thinking. If they had worked together, they could have overpowered the two and escaped. But they were weak, they were emotionally dependent, they thought that was their world and that they would be safe there. It's crazy to think about that. Many of their children are still under supervision and receiving counseling today. Some have managed to rebuild their lives, right? Working, studying, and moving to farther and safer places. But many had trouble adapting, living a normal life, and being adopted by a family. Some of them couldn't even read or write properly. Some had mobility issues, motor coordination problems. Others had emotional difficulties, fears, depression, panic disorder. And Jordan and her sister Jennifer became public voices of the case. They gave interviews and went on shows to talk about what their parents did. But other children preferred to keep their privacy and ended up staying completely away from the media. And recovery is a long process, right? There are probably children who are still recovering to this day. Well, guys, that was today's video. I hope you enjoyed another case on the channel. There's a new video daily on the channel, so stay tuned. If you haven't enabled the notification bell, do so now. Every time I post a new video, YouTube will let you know, and you'll be one of the first to watch my video. If you made it to the end, comment potato so I know you watched. Thanks for sticking around. Share this with your parakeet and parrot. Help me out with this engagement so we can boost it and I can work with this. But to make more content for you guys, and I think that's it. Oh, like it, right? Like the video if you haven't already, and leave a comment too. Kisses to all. See you next video. I'm out. Transcription.